everyone, this is Dawn. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make this card using Close to My Heart's Comfort and Joy scrapbooking stamp and thin cut set. And I'm also going to be using the Merry Christmas sentiment from Seasonal Borders and some of the Blue Belle glitter paper along with the wood panel embossing folder and the floral background thin cut. So let's get started. I'm going to start out by cutting a piece of white daisy cardstock to stamp on, and then I'm going to flip over my Versamat so I can stamp on the soft side, and then I'm going to just choose all my stamps and load them onto the blocks. The best sizes of block to choose for your stamps are the ones that are closest to the same size so that you don't have any ink spilling over when you stamp your image. Sometimes you get a little transfer if your block is too big. So I'm loading everything up and getting ready to stamp, and then I'm going to hit my white daisy cardstock with some anti-static powder, and I'm going to stamp in Versamark so that I can emboss all of these images. So it's hard to see them on camera, but you'll see them once I sprinkle some embossing powder over everything. So I'm just going to stamp all of these images out, and I'm just spacing them far enough apart because I'm going to cut them all out with the thin cuts. So I'm going to get a variety of all of these images, so I have a lot to choose from to create my card front. Okay, and now I'm going to bring a coffee filter in, and I'm going to use the silver tinsel embossing powder from Ranger. And I'm just sprinkling all of the powder over my images and then tapping the excess off. So we'll get all those covered, and it was one of those days I was spilling embossing powder everywhere, so sometimes it can be a little messy. Alright, so now I've got everything ready to heat with my heat tool, so I'm speeding this up super fast, and I'll just melt all of this embossing powder. And we'll get all of those heat set. Okay. Now we're ready to cut everything out. So I'm going to bring my Big Shot in, and then I'm going to use the thin cuts to cut out all of these images. So I'll show one on camera and you'll get the idea, and then I'll skip ahead. So I'm going to set this largest die up, and I'm tacking it down with some purple tape. It's a low tack tape. You could use washi tape as well to keep your die from moving when you run it through. So that's what it looks like after it's all cut out. Okay, so now I've cut everything else out, and then I've also cut some just plain white daisy shapes, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment in Blue Belle ink on white daisy. And then there's a small thin cut in that Comfort and Joy set that fits perfectly for this Merry Christmas sentiment, so I'm going to cut that out as well. So we'll run that through the Big Shot. And then I have my sentiment. Okay. So the next step is to cut a piece of white daisy that's just a little bit wider than the background thin cut. So I cut it about 4.5 inches, and I'm going to run my background thin cut through my Big Shot, and this is a large die, so I recommend going back and forth several times to make sure all parts of the die have actually cut through. And that's what you get after you run it through and poke out all the little bits. Okay, so now I have a piece of Blue Belle cardstock that is cut just a little bit smaller, and that's going to back up that white daisy floral then cut. And then I'm going to cut another piece of white daisy, and this is at 1.5 by 4.25 inches. And I'm going to create kind of a panel to anchor my sentiments on the front of my card. I've cut a couple strips of Blue Belle, and I'm going to tuck those under each side. Okay, so this is the wood panel embossing folder, and I'm going to put that piece of 1.5 by 4.25 inch white daisy in my embossing folder, and I'm kind of lining it up and looking at what it looks like, and I'm sort of placing it strategically in that folder so it embosses the way I want it to look. Now I'm just going to run that through. Okay, so now we're ready to start building our card. So I've got my card base. This is going to be a side fold A2 card, and kind of placing things out, and I'm figuring out which poinsettia pieces I want to build my flower with. So I'm just kind of layering things just to see how many layers I want to do and which pieces I want to use for this flower. I'm thinking that's going to be it. But of course I have to fuss with it a little bit more just to be sure. Nope, not crazy about that. My first choice is what I like the best. So I'm taking my bone folder and I'm going to give a little dimension to this flower. So I'm just kind of curving the leaves around my bone folder and then pushing them back so that they curve out and up, and it gives it some dimension to my flower. So I'm going to do that with all the petals. It's really easy. You just bend it out and then kind of back in, out and back in over your thumb. Okay, there we go. All right, now we're ready to start gluing things together. So the first layer with the glitter paper to the card base, I'm going to use the Tombow Aqua, and I'm just using some really thin beads of glue. And then I'm going to put that down on my card front. And then the next layer, because I'm going white daisy to the glitter paper, I'm going to switch it up and use the white Tombow glue. It's a little bit thicker and stickier. And again, I'm just using really thin bead so that it doesn't squish out once I place it down on my card front. But this glue, it's thick and sticky, and it'll adhere to that glitter paper. Sometimes the glitter paper, it's a little bit tricky with the right adhesives to figure out what's going to stick to it, but I found that this glue works best. But use it sparingly so that you don't have it all squishing out around the edges. Okay, so now I'm going to put my embossed wood panel piece down with some of the thin 3D foam tape. So that's going to pop up just a little bit so that I'll be able to slide those 2 glitter strips under the edges. So I'm figuring out the placement. And a basic design principle is when you're looking at instead of placing this piece right in the center, if you bump it up a bit, it's more pleasing to the eye to have more space at the bottom than at the top. So I place that just a little bit above the center and about 2.25 inches up. And then I'm going to take each of these Blue Belle glitter strips and tuck them under each side. The top and the bottom So about a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch shows. And I'm just eyeballing it. Okay, so now I'm going to assemble my flower, and I'm going to use these thin 3D foam dots, and I'm just sandwiching everything together. So, got my flower all built, and then I'm going to adhere it to the card front. Okay. All right, next step is to take all these silver embossed berries and leaves, and I'm going to tuck them under my flower. So before I add adhesive, I'm kind of placing things all around my card just to see what I like and where I want them to go. All right, I think I like that, and I'm just gonna get everything tacked down with some of that Tombow white glue. And just use my tweezers to tuck each piece underneath my flower petals. And another thing that I would have liked to have added to this card front is some of the silver embellishing thread, but I don't have any left, so I gotta order some. I'll show you another card once that comes, and I'll show you how that looks. But I think this turned out pretty nice. Okay, and then for the center of my flower, I'm going to use some of these Blue Belle glitter gems. And first I thought 5 was going to look okay, but then ultimately you'll see in the final pictures that I switched it up and used only 3. Okay, and then last step is to add my sentiment, and I'm going to add that with some of the thin 3D foam tape. And then my card is finished. So all of these supplies are available in my online store. I'll make a list with links in the description below. Look at all that dimension and glitter and shine. I think it turned out pretty. I love this Blue Belle glitter paper. It's so pretty. So you can shop at my online store. The URL is in the upper right corner, and I'll make a link in the description below as well. I appreciate you watching my video today. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button, and thanks for watching.